Hello and welcome back to a brand new Fantasy Author Lounge. Now this month I am joined by a very special guest indeed. You may know him as the author of the Riyria Chronicles, the Riyria Revelations, and the new Final Empire series. He's a 7-time Goodreads Choice Award nominee. He's a New York Times bestselling author, a Washington Post bestselling author, and a USA Today bestselling author. So who am I talking about? Well, it gives me great pleasure to be joined in the lounge this month by none other than Michael J Sullivan. Welcome, Michael. Great to have you on the Fantasy Author Lounge. Thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Yeah, can't complain. Nice and sunny here in Victoria. You're in Virginia, aren't you?
I am. Yes, East Mid-Atlantic.
I'm really excited to dig in and find out more about your books, your writing process. So for anyone who hasn't come across your work, tell us more about yourself, Michael, seeing as you've had quite a varied and impressive career.
So you're going to have I'll try to make the long story short. So I started out as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
I had a scholarship to go to an art studio or art college in Detroit, and then I got my first real job at a studio. So I was doing illustration work, and then my wife finished her engineering degree, so she became the breadwinner, and I stayed home and became a stay-at-home dad. During which time I wrote books. I had always been writing ever since I was about 13 or so, but then I did it kind of full-time, more or less, while I was raising the kids. Ended up spending about 15, 20 years writing and putting out several novels and trying to get an agent and such. None of that worked out. So I quit. And I started an advertising agency, which actually turned out to be quite successful. This was after moving from Detroit to Vermont and then down to Raleigh, North Carolina. So I had an advertising agency there during the big .com boom. We serviced the .com companies because my wife was she was into software, so she could talk their language and explain it to me, and then I would do the ads or logos or whatever we did. We had a whole bunch of stuff. It was very successful. We had AT&T and ABB as customers, so we were doing quite well with that. But then I got really tired of it. So getting really bored because I wouldn't write anymore because I had spent so long learning how to write and practicing how to write, and I had written 13 novels and never got anywhere. I just put them in drawers, so I said, forget that. I just couldn't bring myself to do it more, but I just had this idea in my head that was driving me crazy. And my daughter had dyslexia. She hated reading, so I thought, well, I tried to get her a book to read. I got her Harry Potter, and I started reading it myself, and it reminded me what I liked about reading and fantasy and all that. So I said, what the heck? I'm just going to write a book for the heck of it, and I'm not going to get it published because that was just sucking up too much of my life. So I just started writing a series of 6 books as a hobby. And my wife read it. She said, this is great. We need to get this published. And she kind of helped me make that happen.
Brilliant.
So after that, kind of closed up the agency, moved to D.C., and I got the books published from a small press, and then when it kind of fell out of, financially it didn't do so well. It didn't go out of business, but they were having trouble paying their bills, and so we got our rights back from them, went self-publishing for a couple of years, and I started making enough money through self-publishing that the Big Five were willing to pick me up, and then I went through Orbit, and then over to Del Rey, and now kind of coming back to self-publishing again. And although we're kind of partnering with Remote Press for printing, but we're keeping the ebook rights. So that's kind of the whole thing.
Excellent. So would you class yourself as a hybrid author these days? Is that a term that you think it's gone a little bit kind of old-fashioned, even in the last couple of years that it's been coined?
the old-fashioned term that was totally new a couple of years ago.
That's it.
Wow, things are moving quick. Because I literally am a hybrid author because I have several books that are traditionally published. I have several books that are, I have at least one book that's small press published, and I have several books that are self-published. And I'm hybrid on a triumvirate of 3 different options there.
Triumvirate. Top word score for that one. We talked about, the triumvirate that you have there and the different ways that you've published over the years. And you talked about, different kind of ways of approaching the business. What would you say would be the biggest contributing factor to your success over the years?
Oh, that's easy. My wife.
I had a funny feeling you'd say that.
I mean, that's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Without her, I wouldn't have been published. She is a business genius. She's the one who, see, both my wife and I are the type of people who we teach ourselves things. I taught myself pretty much how to write, and she taught herself how to sell. And in the publishing industry, as you well know, just from the comment about hybriding, it changes so quickly that you kind of have to constantly stay on on what's happening. And she does that very well. She keeps contact with a lot of different people in the industry. She's always experimenting with new methods of getting the word out and selling and promoting. So she's the one who's been doing most of that. But that aside, other things, other than the fact that you have to stay on the top of the market and figure out and take chances and figure out what works and what doesn't, that's one thing. The other thing I would say that my books are, they have really good characters, and I think that we have good characters. A book is going to grab readers and will keep them. Whereas if it's just a good story, it's kind of a one-off. But you love, like, think of Sherlock Holmes. I mean, it's been going on for 100 years now. Yeah. I mean, once you get a good character or a pair of characters, people are going to want to stay with them.
Yeah,
and probably the last thing I would say is the fact that my books appeal to the mass audience because they're fantasy, so it's worldwide. I mean, no one really. If you're setting like Dresden Files in Chicago, it might not play so well in Bulgaria. The other thing is that I also didn't go too heavy into profanity or sex or graphic violence, so that actually opens it up to an even wider audience. You have people who are 13-year-olds telling their mothers to read it, and their mothers are telling their grandmothers to read it. So you have a much wider audience. So I end up having a more mass appeal on that thing. Maybe that had something to do with it. I'm not sure, but maybe.
I think that's great
question, but hey.
Let's move on to talk a little bit about the business and dig into that, because you, again, do lots of different things, but Kickstarter seems to be, one of your sharpest tools in your box, especially recently. I mean, was it yesterday or the day before you just closed your most recent Kickstarter project?
Last night.
Our
little end of Kickstarter celebration. Yes.
Yeah. Don't blame you. So what was the final tally? I know it was over six figures. It was 115,000 last time I looked?
It was 110 and something and change. I forget exactly when it closed out. That's amazing. I mean, it may go up from there because of last minute people, but I think that's what it was.
That's incredible. I see the Canadian side, so I have to do quick conversions in my head. So it looks very impressive in Canadian. Excellent. So talking about that, because I mean that's not the first Kickstarter that you've run. You've run a series of successful Kickstarters for a range of books. And so if you could offer some advice to some authors who are looking to use Kickstarter as a tool to either self-publish or fund special editions, things like that, what was some of the quick tips that you'd offer for running maybe a successful Kickstarter project?
Well, before I get to that, I was going to say that one of the reasons we did the Kickstarter was as a means of trying to explain to traditionally published authors who are having trouble because for whatever reason they had a series running and maybe they weren't doing so well, so that the publisher then wouldn't pick up the last book.
Right.
As a result of that, they didn't know what to do, and we would say, well, you can self-publish. They said, oh, no, that doesn't work because I want to do it well and I don't have the money to do that. And then we suggested Kickstarter. And they said, nah, that's not going to work. And we said, yeah, we think you could. And they said, no. So just kind of prove it to them, we did our first Kickstarter. And one of the things we discovered, which was fascinating, was that not only did we raise money, but we didn't raise it off of our fan base. It was really new people in a totally new echo chamber in the Kickstarter community who just loved to back things. And they became fans of mine. So it was as much a marketing tool as it is a way to raise money to get printings done or to get pre-orders accounted for. But to answer your question, probably one of the things would be using early bird specials as part of it, and to contact your base and let them know that these are coming up in advance. It's something that if you do it beforehand, you can generate a bit of excitement and you can come out of the gate really strong. Another thing would be to balance your stretch goals so that there's a little something for everyone. You don't want to have, a spike where people have to spend a lot of money. You want something good all along the way, so that's going to get a larger group of people involved. Also, the last thing would probably be you want to hold back on your stretch goals. Don't put them all out there. You want to put those out there as there's a lull in the Kickstarter. So when you start noticing there's not a lot of interest, you put up a new one, so it gets people interested. It gives a point of contact, and like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I should go back to that. So those are probably the first 3 things that would probably help.
Would you recommend it for a first-time author, Kickstarter? You know, if someone's literally just publishing their first-time book, not much of a fan base, do you think Kickstarter is the most useful tool?
Probably not that useful. It's really going to be something that if you've already proven yourself, you're going to have a much better chance through the fact that people are more likely to trust you. Also, you run the risk that if a first-time author, if you don't have the book done, so you're trying to raise money to write the book, and then you don't complete the book, then you have a problem. So I would suggest if you're going to be doing that kind of thing, you have the book done and edited, and you're just trying to get it out there in sort of a pre-order form, that would be fine. But if you have no track record and you're not even that confident that you can do this, then I wouldn't do that. I would wait till you have some people out there who know about you. That way you can leverage that as credibility, and you're going to have a much better chance. We really thought it'd be ideal for people who had a decent base and just didn't think they could, because they were living off of advances, and now they don't have that anymore. So how are they going to proceed? Well, this is a way of getting that advance so that you can, go ahead and work on your book. So that's kind of how we aimed it, and it seems to work pretty well. I don't really know exactly how well it works for people who have never written a book. I mean, it's out there a lot, but I'm not sure that those are quite as successful.
Yeah, that's good advice there. Thanks for that. So you kind of are uniquely placed to have quite, a good, I would say, not even overview, a very sharp insight, detailed view of both the self-publishing path, the traditional path, and obviously the hybrid path as well. But there's a lot of information, even though we live in an age of information, and self-publishing has kind of been around and entrenched itself for a couple of decades now. But there's still quite a lot of misconceptions flying around and a lack of information, I think, to the general public and also first-time authors. So, from your perspective, what are the common misconceptions, or the most common misconceptions, of self-publishing in traditional world?
Well, it's always been the same for traditional. I always hit the same problem with there. Talk to anyone who's thinking going traditional, and that is that they want to go traditional generally for the same reason, and that is they feel that they won't have to market their books. They can just sit in their own room and they can write, and they can just send them out to the publisher, and they're going to take care of everything. And that's just not happening.
Unfortunately,
in fact, I was talking to someone just recently who was trying to decide which way to go, what route to take. And they were saying that, they have a very demanding job, so they wanted to go traditional so that they didn't have to do all that marketing.
That's understandable.
And I was trying to explain that, that if you're traditionally publishing, you have a very short period of time, because one of the things we discovered, we went to the Del Rey, the Random House warehouse, and we did a tour of it, and they have 2 sections to it. They have like the current section, and then they have like the backlist section where they put books when they're no longer viable. We went there and we discovered a very interesting thing, that the moment that your book is released, it's shipped to the back because it's done. It either all of traditional is based off of pre-orders. So in order to even get anywhere, you have to spend the time just 6 months prior to your book being released, really promoting it hard.
Wow.
So for this woman, you'd have to be we knew a young woman who literally took off. She was going to be going to Europe with her family. She put that on hold because she had to spend that time promoting it. And that's what you have to do. So you really have to spend an enormous amount of time promoting before the book is released if you're traditionally published, because otherwise you're just going to fall off. You're not going to stay in books for very long, then you're going to have problems with the next book. Whereas if you're self-published, you're like a Twinkie. I mean, you can be put on the shelf and you'll stay there forever. And you can promote that next time your next book comes out, and it's not going to hurt you. So that's not considered to be true. As far as self is concerned, I think the biggest misconception there is that if you're self-published, you're not going to make any money, or you're not going to make much money. And I actually find that that's completely the opposite. Again, I think more people are making a living wage, or even beyond that, self-publishing than they are traditionally publishing. And I know a lot of traditionally published authors, and I know a lot of self-published authors, and it seems to be bearing out. And it's usually just the return on investment per unit that you're selling. And also, if you're self-publishing, you tend to connect yourself with other self-publishers who can help you. And it's a very nice, tight community who are very willing to help each other. And those people are willing to show you how you can maximize your revenue and sell your books. And as a result of that, you're making more money per unit, and you can utilize the different tools to make yourself sell better. And as a result of that, most self-published authors are making more money. Now, this is when I want to clarify that if you're self-publishing, you're literally self-publishing. You're not writing a book and throwing it on the internet. There's professional self-publishers, and then there are people who write books and throw it out there. And I think all too many people, they look at self-publishing as being just crap because people just write books and throw them on it. That's not what I'm talking about. Those same people are the same people who write a book and send it off to a slush pile at a publisher, and it gets nowhere either. So if you're comparing apples to apples, you're talking about professional people who are entrepreneurs who are going to try and sell their work, who investigate and get good covers, who get good designers, who have it edited. These are the people who are going to make it in self-publishing. And if you're traditional, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to have your book peer-reviewed by other readers. You're going to have it gone over, and it's going to pass that gatekeeping. So there's a gatekeeper in both cases. Those are probably the two things I find most people confuse in the two areas.
I'd agree on that one, especially the ever-present stigma. In fact, I was having a conversation with someone down the pub a couple of weeks ago, and got talking about what each of us do, and the idea of saying, I'm an author, and they said published or self-published, and I said, do you see a difference? And he was cheeky enough to say, well, one person's very interesting to talk to over a pub table, the other person's successful. I said, which do you think is which? And he said, right, well, I think, traditionally published, and we got into that whole conversation. But I find that stigma still exists, and I think, it feeds into that, the idea of, the slush pile and the lack of income and low professionalism.
It's less, though. I think it's no longer anywhere near what it used to be. It used to be, if you said you're self-published, people would just, there were almost no sites on the internet that would reach you. And that's not the case quite so much anymore. Now people are willing to take that chance. Because there are people now who are self-published who are huge, that are making just ridiculous amounts of money. And they're not as well known. They don't quite get the big splash and glitz of fame that you get from traditional publishing. But for the most part, when I tell traditional publishers, like when I was self-published, I would tell them how much I was making, their jaw would hit the table, and they go, what?
I can imagine,
That's not possible. So, it's weird, but I think the stigma's fading now. It's not nearly as bad.
Oh, completely, yeah. Just wish it would go away for good. Think we're maybe a couple of years off that one. Let's leave the business side behind for a bit, and let's talk a bit more about the writing process, because I know that you've got countless notebooks behind you full of stories that you've either written or have to be published, and you're obviously quite a prolific writer as well as a successful publisher and self-publisher and hybrid author. So let's find out a bit more about your writing process. Just very quickly, are you more of a pantser or a planner?
When I first started writing, I was 100% discovery writer. So you should be using pantser. Many people find that to be offensive. Not me, but yes. For people who don't know, discovery or pantser is a person who would write by the seat of their pants or discover the story as they go along, as opposed to someone who thinks ahead and makes critical notes and plans it all out. So in this case, I started out as a discovery, and I actually think that every single writer in the world begins as a discovery writer. When first time you're writing, you're just making up a story, and you're not really thinking of having it become anything. And I think a lot of people begin that way. I began that way. I wrote, and the more I wrote novels, literally I wrote novel after novel, and I discovered in the process of teaching myself how to write that the more I thought it out in advance, the less time I wasted. I had written like 6 months worth of 50,000 words, spending a lot of time on it, and then, oops, this isn't going anywhere, and I was totally, lost. So I had to try and figure, and I noticed that the more I thought it ahead, like if I knew how it was going to end, and I kind of knew what was going to happen in the middle, and I knew how it began, I had a much better chance of completing that book in a reasonable time. So I became more and more of an outliner as I went along, to the point now where I'm probably 75% outliner and 25% discovery, and that's usually as it's as if you're taking a trip across the country, and you're going, say, from New York to Los Angeles. You say, okay, I'm leaving at this time in the morning. You plan to leave, and I'm going to stop off in, let's say, Chicago and Denver, and then I'll get there. On the way, you may get to Chicago. This is really fun, and I met a guy who's going to take me down, to I don't know, St. Louis. You end up deviating, but then you come back up to Denver. And so you can change it if it makes sense.
Yeah.
You have to follow what makes sense in the story. You can't force your story to go where it doesn't want to go. I mean, once you develop your characters, once they have a sense of themselves in your mind, you're not going to be able to make them do things they shouldn't, because if you do that, you contrive the story.
Right, yeah.
So you take who the character is plus the event or the stimulus, and then it equals what their action is going to be. And if you change up that formula at all, you end up going to have a real problem. It's like you put a mouse in a maze, you see where it goes. Well, you just grab him and you move him physically, it's going to seem weird. Yeah. So don't. But yeah, I would say I'm mostly outliner. Like I said, 5%, but my books never end up the way I plan them.
That's interesting. I mean, what would you say the initial inklings of a novel are for you? Because I mean, they're different for every author. For me, for example, a title or a word or a single line, that sort of thing will kind of kick off a thought process that will lead me into a book idea. But what would you say is most often the genesis for you?
It's collision of ideas. If you're watching a horror film and it irritates you because people are going to do something stupid, well, then you might imagine some other type of character being in that position, someone who isn't stupid, someone who is clever, or instead of having, some moron in a haunted house and the walls are bleeding and says, let's stay another night. Instead of something like that, you'd have, I don't know, Sherlock Holmes in that situation, or someone who is, far more adept at something like that. And what would that do to the story? But that's generally how I come up with ideas. I come up, like, for instance, I for my book, Death of Dulgath, I wrote an explanation of how I actually wrote that book. And part of that was I was literally watching a Tom Cruise movie. What was it, Jack Reacher?
All right.
And I liked the thriller pace. I liked how from the very beginning I was immediately interested in the story, because you had this really cool opening. And I'm like, that's really kind of, I would like to do that with fantasy. And then I started putting my own characters in that situation, and how would that transpire? I went, oh, that would be neat. Now, I mean, just imagine if you took some, kick-ass, fantasy characters and put them instead of Dorothy in Wizard of Oz. How would that story change?
Great idea. Yeah.
This is where I get the genesis of my ideas. It's usually, a situation and a character and how those two mash up.
I think that's fantastic. Yeah, I can just imagine just replacing Die Hard, for instance, when you're saying some sort of kick-ass film. Die Hard just sprung to my mind. So fantasy spire. Yeah, I'm just going to go and write that down. Actually, good stuff. So let's talk about Michael J. Sullivan when he's not writing, because I know you get up to a lot of different things in your time. Maybe, yeah. Well, I've seen on social media recently you've got into bird watching. I think that must be quite a nice break, or a good opportunity to get away from the writing desk, but also quite focusing at the same time.
Okay, so first of all, are you aware of the huge conflict between Trekker and Trekkie? You would never call them one or the other. These mean separate things. So in the case of bird watching, there is birding and there is bird watching. So some people are both, but bird watching are the type of people who would sit in a park and watch the birds, or would sit have a feeder for their house and watch the birds. Birding is far more active and competitive. These are the people who literally travel great distances to record in competition how many birds they can see.
Wow. Okay.
They have long lists. So what's happening is I actually got into a competition with my daughter on Thanksgiving this year. We were watching a movie called The Big Year, which was Jack Black, Steve Martin, and Owen Wilson. And they are actually, there was a book called The Big Year, and it recorded what actually happened. I think it was 1996. I'm not sure about the year. Right. But it was, every year there is birders who try to see as many species as they can. And the ones who record the most are in a magazine and have a list. So it's a competition to see who can see the most. And in that year, there were these three people who were working very hard on their big year. And they wanted to see how many of the same species in Canada and the United States they could see. Basically North America, but for some reason Mexico is not included, and I don't know why that is. But the idea is to see how many you can, you make a list. And the reward for this, if you see the most in the year, is that you get your name in a magazine that no one ever reads. And people spend $60,000, $70,000 doing this, and their marriage is in jeopardy. And there's no rules except, and there's no judges. No one checks up on this. You simply, it's on an honor system. You tell them how you saw, and that's what they go with. So my daughter and I saw this, and I took the family out, and we went up on a trail because we live across the street from Shenandoah National Park. Yeah, beautiful spot. We took cameras. And binoculars, we found our first bird, and we took a picture of it. And we came back, and like I said, my son thought it was a great way to get out in the woods because he liked doing that. My wife thought it was nice exercise. But my daughter and I realized we had entered into a really vicious competition. We have, over the last few months, started getting serious about this. So right now, I'm up to 99 birds, and she's at 73, I believe.
Ooh, that's close there.
So I literally went with my wife down to Key West. And for that vacation, we literally spent every day birding. We went to different places. I mean, afterwards we might have drinks and stuff like that. But for the most part, we were actually birding all the time. When they went to the Everglades, we were taking shots there and stuff. So yeah, it's a very serious thing.
So if your writing progress and the other books that you've got planned start slipping off the calendar and getting delayed, we know why then.
Yes. But also, in addition to that, I mean, I do computer games, and and then of course you've been here, so you see that there's a lot of work around the cabin I have to do every year. So there's building and all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah, a bit of archery off the deck. Always good.
Yes, and I don't know if you know that Dirk Ashton sent me an ambidextrous bow, so left-handed people can shoot.
Oh, cool. Look at him. Awesome. Good idea. He's still going to get beaten, though. I hate to say it. So what's next for you, then, after, obviously, the Kickstarter for Age of Legend? What can we look forward to, in the future? Just finishing off that series, or any other special side projects? Or, what have you got going on?
Well, the Kickstarter was for Age of Legend, which was the 4th in the series. Right after that will be Age of Death, which is the 5th in the series. After that will be the final book, which is Age of Empire with a Y, so it doesn't conflict so much with the game.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
And then once those are finished, they're done. They just have to be edited and put out. I'm now presently a book and a half into the next trilogy, which is going to take place in between the two books. I have Riyria, which is like the medieval period, and books I just got done, which are in the, like you'd say, Greek mythology period. And then in the middle of that would be the Roman era. So that's essentially I'm writing a trilogy that covers essentially 2,000 years. So these books will not be one connected story. They're going to be more along the lines of what you say, like Foundation trilogy, or if you don't understand Isaac Asimov, where they're actually separated by several hundred years each, but they make one story and they tell the story of the Empire. So I'm a book and a half into that, and that's pretty much where I'm working now. Those books have already been purchased over in for audio. So as a result of that, I'm kind of on the dime to get that one done.
Yeah, that's great.
That series done.
That's amazing. Yeah, spanning a series spanning 2,000 years that just sounds fantastic. Can't wait to dig into the new series when I get around to it. So if if other people wanted to do that, other people wanted to find you, where can we find your books and more information about you?
Well, you can find me at Riyria.com. That's where my website is, and pretty much all contact information is going to be there. I'm also known as Author Sullivan on Twitter, so you can contact me. Or you can also write to me on Reddit. I happen to visit that place a lot. Nice. But those are probably which we're going to find me. But I mean, if you look at any of my books, you'll find contact information there too. I invite people to come and write to me. I get email, quite frequently. I'm starting to get a little bit too much email at this point. I'm having hard times writing back to people, which is bad. I don't like to not get back to everyone.
That's it. Yeah, too busy birding.
And I was a lot of blood going, wow, that's a terrible thing to suffer.
No, I think it's great. But yeah, well, thank you so much for joining me in the Fantasy Author Lounge, Michael. This has been great to chat to you and get further into your writing process and the business side. And yeah, you've had some fantastic advice for us and insights. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. Excellent. See you later.
Bye.